All right, welcome. So today we're going to be exploring purposefully, which is the first chapter of the Midlife New Life book. And this is the quote that opens the chapter from Simon Sinek. It doesn't matter what you do. What matters is why you do it. It doesn't matter what you do. What matters is why you do it. And Simon wrote the book Start With Why, and has a lot of great TED Talks and a great inspirational teacher. I was privileged to meet him a few years ago at a conference and sat with him for lunch. Really an inspirational person. So these are the core elements, and we're going to go through some of these in more detail than others today. Core elements of this chapter. So meaning, purpose, and calling, words that are often used interchangeably. We'll talk briefly about those. Discovering our purpose. The word discovering is important. I think it's there, and it's an opportunity for us to discover it. Still a few words on core values, the things that are really important to us. Transitions, of course, this is the first step, but William Bridges' transitions model is well known. But that whole idea of letting go and getting into that neutral zone before getting into the change, those three phases, which are not, I mean, they're distinct, but they overlap and they don't always finish before the other one starts. But it's a nice way of thinking about transitions. And another aspect of all of this is identity. Who are we? And also, particularly as we go through, particularly the second half of life, there's lots of identity shifts, and sometimes they're in our control and some aren't. So we have the opportunity for reinvention, and reinvention rather than retirement is very much a part of my philosophy. And then we're going to talk about Conscious Living Manifesto, which is referenced in the book and was quite a large section, but that was one of the things that got removed from the original draft because we had to make it a little smaller. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time on that today because I think it's an important aspect. And as I say, it's not in the book. It's a reference, but the manifesto and the guide is not in the book. So we'll spend a little bit more time on that. I'll skip through some of the others a little bit more quickly. So in the handout I sent out last week are some of the definitions, and you know that there are always definitions, but you know the purpose really is about the difference we want to make in the world, and this is the big why. This is why we're here. What gets us up in the morning? And then our calling really is similar to purpose in my view. Really giving us a sense of direction, seeing life as a process of calls and responses. What am I being called to do? So what has called us in the past? What was our response to those calls? And what's calling us today? And some would say our calling was predetermined. I know there's Rick Warren's written a great book on that. Others will say, well, it's part of life's unfolding. And of course, meaning, really a subjective feeling that our lives fit into a larger context and connotes personal significance about what is felt to be important to us and experiencing of life as somehow making sense. Of course, vision, that vivid, imaginative description of what the world might look like once our purpose has been realized. And I like to think about that as the what. Values, of course, the beliefs, ideals, customs that give significance to our lives and that drive our behaviors. So values are really the things that are important to us. Very subjective, the words, lots of different words, and it's up to us to put the meaning to them. And then this whole idea of identity, really described in some ways by completing sentences that begin with, I am a father, I'm a speaker. What does that identity mean for us? So those are some of the definitions. We've got those in the book as well. So just a starting point. So I wanted to start with this whole idea of purpose, and really just a couple of examples of purpose statements and what people defined their purpose to be. And the pictures here are all relevant to me. The three to the left are all in Tanzania, in the Serengeti. So I had the opportunity to join Richard Leider on an inventure in 2009, what he called an inventure. The adventure was, of course, the walking safari. And these are some of the pictures that were taken. There are lots of them. Of course, the animals, the children in the Hadza tribe, and Gouda. This is Gouda, the oldest elder that we met. We couldn't speak directly in his language, but with the translation, we got a good sense of him. And for me, this is the beginning of my purpose journey. I think Richard has written a lot about the power of purpose, and it was a great teacher. And following that, I met with my own coach to develop purpose. And I think most of you know that I'm a hot air balloon pilot, and so that is me in my Blue Diamonds balloon over the trees of New York. And in my website and on my business card, I had this sort of tagline of taking you higher, and working with my purpose coach. We'd really discovered a sort of an expansion for that. Which for me became my real purpose statement, which I've lived with and tested all forever, really, ever since I really developed this purpose statement, which is about taking people higher, but not only in the balloon, really taking people higher in spirit, in business, and in life. Taking people higher in spirit, in business, and in life. And that really is what I see as my purpose. So whatever I do, if I'm working with business leaders, I may be talking about performance, business performance. We're trying to get that higher. Sometimes in life coaching, it's about helping people look forward and look higher. So in spirit, in business, and in life, taking people higher. So that was the story of mine, and that is in the book. It's an important part for me. And the other story that's relevant, there are some good examples in the book as well, but Marianne, her story is there. We interviewed her, and she was very kind enough to share her story. I mean, she's now become the co-chair of the Patient Family Advisory Council of the Memory and Alzheimer's Treatment Center at Johns Hopkins Bayview Medical Center. So she shared her story of transition. And she had watched her mother suffer and eventually die from Alzheimer's disease. And then her husband of 44 years was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, eventually leading to several strokes, and ultimately died. And Marianne had retired from two really very active careers, one in NASA and previously in the Navy. And the death of her husband severely challenged her search for meaning and fulfillment in the second half of her life. And during our interview, Marianne said it was difficult to transition from a very active working life to a retired life and then to a widowed life. They're huge transitions when we think about these transitions in the second half of life. What had gotten her up in the morning just seemingly had dissipated. And she worked through some really difficult days and nights before finding the start of a path forward. She found free time without meaning, purpose, and structure was incredibly challenging. But emerging from these challenges, Marianne made steady progress towards the transition and was able to describe her life purpose as being an active advocate for Alzheimer research. An active advocate for Alzheimer research. And it really is, for me, an important story of transition, because we do go through a lot of these transitions, not things that we expect. I guess we expect our parents to pass before us, although that's not always the case. But when we lose a life partner, then it's a huge transition. And it takes time to go through those transitions and really maybe define and maybe discover a new purpose. It's not a case for me in that there's only one purpose, that we may have multiple purposes, but I do think there's a sort of an overarching purpose. And Marianne's story, I think, is heartening, but also a recognition that these transitions are challenging. Okay, so I'm going to move on to some of the tools that we refer to in the book. This attention, intention, action, I referred to it last time, but I'll touch on that again because it's a fundamental part of conscious living. And then some questions to help us discover purpose and identity. And then I want to spend a little bit more time on the Conscious Living Manifesto, which I mentioned before, and reflection questions at the end of each chapter. There are reflection questions. So we'll explore each of these today. And so as a reminder, this AIA, attention, intention, leading to action. And attention and intention are in that circle deliberately. It's not as if they're sequential. Sometimes we set an intention and that causes us to really pay attention to what's going on. Alternatively, it may be that our attention is drawn to something. We've become really aware of a situation, either in us or in someone else or in something else. And with that attention comes an intention of what we're going to do, how we're going to show up. So that can be a cycle, but ultimately with both attention and intention, we can move to action. Something I referred to in the Conscious Leadership book as responsible action. And just a quick reference, these are in the book, questions around purpose and identity. And let me do identity first. So as I say, our identity often is something completing those sentences, I am. And there are a lot of ways to define who we are, and that's okay. There's no one answer here. So who are you? I mean, how would you answer that question? What is your identity? Who do you think you are, and how do others see you? And then as we know who we are now, who do we choose to be? I think this is a very powerful question as we go through transitions. Who do we choose to be today? Because it is a choice, and that really is about conscious living. It's about conscious choices. So who do we choose to be? And what do we stand for? What do we stand up and be counted for? And I'll come back to that as part of the manifesto. And so what new identity is emerging as we go through these transitions, through these reinventions? Our identity is often bound up with our work life. But as we transition away from maybe a full-time career into something else, new identities emerge. So this is a more conscious way of thinking about identity. And then purpose, these are the sort of purpose questions to get you thinking about a purpose statement. And I like to think of purpose statements as being, 10 words or less. And I know some people get 11 or 12, but I can remember 10 words or less. If it's 2 sentences, I probably won't remember it. So brief, to the point, but something for you, not necessarily for other people. And we get to those with these questions. What do you really care about? What are you passionate about? And I love this question. What makes you cry? When something happens, what makes you cry? What makes you really want to go and do something about the situation? And why do you do what you do? Though it's a lot of why questions. In coaching, those of us who are coaches know that why questions actually we try and steer away from them. We do in research too. Why? Not always a good question. But in terms of purpose, it is about the big why. What gets you up in the morning? When you wake up, what gets you to jump out of bed? I've got to do this morning. And what is the difference you want to make in this world? So some of the questions, as I say, a real powerful book on this is The Power of Purpose from Richard Leider. The 3rd edition is out. He's working on the 4th edition. I believe it's out later in this year. But great book for getting us to think about purpose. So let me talk a little bit about the Conscious Living Manifesto. And And this emerged from some work I did with clients around conscious leadership. And whether you look at it from a leadership perspective or expand it to living, the elements are virtually the same. So I like to think about this manifesto as a declaration of your vision, mission, purpose, core values, beliefs, and intentions, expressing who you are and how you wish to show up in the world. So a declaration, and for me, the declaration is for me. It's not for general publication. I'm going to share mine with the intent of part of the learning. But the manifesto is for ourselves to declare to ourselves what we're aspiring to be doing. And I know you can't read the one on the left, but I'm going to expand that in a minute. That is my conscious living manifesto. So the definitions are on the right. I think it's just important to know what we're talking about. So this manifesto, a declaration of your vision, mission, purpose, core values, beliefs, and intentions, expressing who you are and how you wish to show up in the world. We talked about purpose, the difference we want to make in the world, the big why. Why are we here? The vision, a vivid, imaginative description of what the world will look like once the purpose has been realized, and that's the what. The mission, the core strategy that must be undertaken to fulfill the purpose and realize the vision, which is the how. So we have the why, the what, and the how in here. And then values. We're probably all familiar with values, the beliefs, ideals, and customs that give significance to our lives and that are reflected in our behaviors. And then identity, described by completing the sentences beginning with I am. And a good reflective exercise. I don't know if many of you had a chance to do the exercises, but a good exercise. And I've referenced the guide to developing a conscious living manifesto. We hope to put that on the website. It's not there yet, but I will send you a copy of that tomorrow. It's a 5-page guide to developing your conscious living manifesto. It's what I use with my own clients. So I like one-page declarations. So this has been challenging to get it onto one page, which is perhaps why you can't read it. It's still a little too small unless you have a very big screen. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time just sharing. This is perhaps a little vulnerability to share what I defined as my own conscious living manifesto. I do that, as I say, to share what you might think about. It doesn't have to be in this format. It doesn't have to be these words. But it has to be yours, has to come from inside of you. And I'd encourage you to develop this open, not today or tomorrow, but over the coming weeks. It's not something that takes just a few minutes to put together. It takes a few, weeks usually. So living and leading consciously that's what I'm doing. That's what the book is. It's what my conscious leadership book is about. And so this is my personal conscious living manifesto. And as you can see here, my purpose statement is at the top: taking people higher in spirit, in business, and in life. And you find it on my website. I've declared that, and I use that to test whether my behaviors are actually living up to that purpose. Is what I'm doing with my interactions helping people to a higher place, making them feel higher in spirit, in business performance, and in life in general. So no limitation there, really. And then in addition to that, this purpose of making the world a better place to live and work. For me, that's a big part of my philosophy, if you like, but it's also a purpose statement for me. And as I say, I like to think of an overarching purpose statement, but there may be many other purpose statements. Some may be relating to our family or to our business, or, there are possibilities for more than one purpose statement. And then a vision. So this is the big vision, a world where everyone is living and leading consciously. I mean, that's a grand vision. It's an aspiration. So how can I get there? How can I at least get some steps towards that world where everyone is living and leading consciously? And so that's done through this mission. And the way I describe it, awakening consciousness and human potential, helping people shape their future with higher levels of confidence, achieving greater fulfillment in their personal and professional lives, and positive impact in their local and global communities. And this attention, intention, action is there as a reminder as to how I get there. I put my attention somewhere, I set an intention, and then I take action. So that's the top part of it. I jump to the bottom. This is some of my identity statements. Some of these are more aspirational than others. So I'm caring, courageous, creative, loving, vulnerable. Some of those are more aspirational than others, but it's the way I like to think of myself. On the website, we have the eagle. So I'm an eagle riding the thermals. We used to fly a balloon. We didn't used to ride the thermals in a balloon, but that's how I feel of getting up above the ground and riding the thermals. An edge walker coming from Judy Neal. Those of you who know Judy Neal, she has wrote the book on edge walking, and I'm still connected to Judy. Walking between worlds, going beyond my comfort zone, jumping off the cliff and learning to fly on the way down. That's what an edge walker does. And a way shower, finding pathways to new futures. And I show up as, again, this is intention. I show up as a conscious, wise elder. Again, aspirational. A guide for the journey, a spirit holder, which was a name given to me by Craig Neal many years ago. So those are some of the ways I describe my identity. And then this phrase at the bottom is actually from my Conscious Leadership book. But again, something that I think is important. We're shaping our future as if we'll live forever. So we look forward and shape our future assuming we're going to be here forever, but yet living today as if we'll die tomorrow, because we never know. So those are some of the ways I described identity. And then in the middle of that document is what I stand for and what I believe. And again, I'm sort of being a little vulnerable here because I stand for these things. Do I always stand that strong? I don't know. I try to share my own thoughts about this. So I stand for peace and harmony. So, this non-violent world is what I stand for. It's challenging in these days, but exploring new ways of thinking and being. So Search for Common Ground is a great organization that's really, a different way of thinking. I stand for exemplary performance, striving to be the best for the world rather than the best in the world. I stand for clean water. This has been one of my very strong areas and is quite a major section in the Helping Humanities chapter. I live by the ocean in Florida. I live by the English Channel here in England. So the oceans, the rivers, fresh water to drink for all, and water conservation. So, when I think about environmental issues, this is the one that's at the top of my list. And raising consciousness for the greater good of humanity. So that's what I stand for. But I also believe in other things. I believe in saving and savoring the planet. Again, reflected in the chapter on the book. The inherent worth and dignity of every person, one of the Unitarian principles. In clarity of purpose and responsible action. So hopefully you've seen that from what I've said so far today. Very much a focus on what's our purpose and what responsible action should we take. But also the power of dreams, the power of possibility thinking, really saying it is possible. Nothing is in my way. And the possibility of multiple right answers. There's just not one answer to our problems. There are multiple answers. Let's be open to whatever they are. So that's the way I described it. It gets onto one page. I left some things out so that I could get it onto one page and still read it. I like one page. I rarely turn a page, so it's important. Those are some of my philosophies about the Conscious Living Manifesto. And as I say, I will send you the guide tomorrow. And I would encourage you to work on it, to develop it, and it's an ongoing exercise. I love working with my coaching clients to get them really thinking about each of these elements. And a purpose statement can take a few sessions, vision can take a few sessions, but a great way to get people to think about where they want to be in the future. All right, so hopefully we'll run through the chapter. There's a lot of other things in there. It's always very difficult to know what to leave out. But these are the reflection questions at the end. And I invite you, these are reflection questions. So I invite you just to sit with these. They're not there just to answer, but to sit with and reflect and meditate on. So what is your life purpose? Why are you here? What gets you up in the morning? What is that vision of what the world will look like when you're truly fulfilling your purpose? What's your identity? Who do you think you are? How do others see you? And who do you choose to be? What new identity is emerging? What do you have to do to let go of, to make space for your new identity? Okay, so I'm going to pause there.